They say you can tell a lot about a woman by what she wears, but you can tell even more about a man by who he brings to dinner. When Darian walked into the Harrington estate with his mistress, Tiffany, on his arm, the air in the room didn't just shift, it froze. Tiffany thought she had won. She had the man, the youth, and the audacity. But when she opened her mouth to mock Sophia's outdated dress, she didn't realize she wasn't just insulting a piece of fabric. She was insulting the only person in the room holding the keys to the family empire. What happened next wasn't just a dinner table argument. It was a methodical destruction that no one saw coming. The envelope on the kitchen counter was heavy, cream-colored, and textured like linen. It was the kind of stationery that whispered money rather than shouted it. Sophia recognized the calligraphy immediately. It was the handwriting of Eleanor Harrington, her mother-in-law. Sophia stared at it while the coffee machine sputtered, the noise harsh in the quiet, empty house. It was an invitation to the Harrington annual autumn dinner. In any other year, this would have been routine. Sophia would have already been coordinating with Eleanor about the floral arrangements, discussing whether they should serve the 98 Cabernet or the 05. But this wasn't any other year. This was the year Darian had left. It had been 6 months since Darian Harrington, heir to the Harrington logistics fortune, had decided that his 34-year-old wife was stifling his growth. He had moved out of their modest, comfortable suburban home and into a penthouse downtown. A penthouse that, Sophia later learned, came equipped with a 24-year-old brand ambassador named Tiffany. Sophia took a sip of black coffee, feeling the burn in her chest. She hadn't signed the divorce papers yet. Robert Harrington, Darian's father, had advised her to wait. "Patience, Sophia," the old man had told her during their weekly lunch, which they still maintained despite his son's behavior. "Darian is a fool, but the law is precise. Wait." Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop, a text from Darian. "Darian, my mother says you're coming to the dinner on Saturday. I hope you know I'm bringing Tiffany. Don't make it weird." Sophia stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't asking, he was telling. He was bringing his mistress, technically his girlfriend now, though the ink on the separation agreement wasn't even dry, to the most intimate family gathering of the year. She typed back, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. "Sophia, it's your parents' house, Darian. I'm invited. I'll be there." "Darian, just try to dress up a bit, okay? Tiffany is really into fashion. I don't want you looking dowdy next to her. It reflects badly on me." Sophia put the phone down face first. Dowdy. For 10 years, Sophia had been the perfect corporate wife. She had smoothed over Darian's drunken faux pas at galas. She had managed the books for his consulting firm that never seemed to make a profit, and she had nursed Eleanor through her hip surgery. She wasn't flashy. She didn't wear neon logos or carry bags that cost as much as a Honda Civic. She wore tailored blazers, sensible heels, and kept her hair in a neat chignon. She was the bedrock, and Darian, it seemed, was tired of rocks. He wanted fireworks. She looked back at the invitation. The dress code was listed as black tie, family legacy. It was a whimsical theme Eleanor had picked, usually meaning wearing something with history or sentimental value. Sophia walked up the stairs to the master bedroom, her bedroom now. She opened the walk-in closet. On the left were her sensible suits. On the right, pushed to the very back in a garment bag that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, was a dress she hadn't worn in 5 years. It wasn't new. It wasn't trendy. It didn't have a designer logo plastered across the chest. It was a vintage midnight blue velvet gown, structured with a high neck and a plunging back. It was heavy, made of a fabric they simply didn't manufacture anymore. It had belonged to Robert Harrington's late sister, a woman who had been a diplomat in Paris in the 60s. Robert had given it to Sophia for her 5th wedding anniversary, saying, "My sister had a spine of steel, Sophia. just like you. She'd want you to have this." Darian had hated it then. "It looks like a funeral curtain," he had laughed. Sophia unzipped the bag. The velvet caught the morning light, shimmering like deep ocean water. She wasn't going to the dinner to win Darian back. She was done with Darian. She was going to the dinner because she was a Harrington by marriage, and until the judge slammed the gavel, she held her place at that table. But Darian's text gnawed at her. Tiffany is into fashion. Sophia ran her hand over the velvet. "Fine," she whispered to the empty room. "Let's talk about fashion." The Harrington estate was located in the rolling hills just outside of the city, a sprawling Georgian manor that intimidated most people before they even reached the front door. The driveway was lined with century-old oaks that cast long, claw-like shadows across the gravel. Sophia arrived in her Volvo. It was clean, practical, and utterly invisible. She parked off to the side, away from the main portico, knowing that Darian would want the center spot for whatever sports car he was leasing this month. As she stepped out of the car, the autumn air bit at her exposed skin. She had paired the midnight blue velvet dress with a simple string of pearls, real ones, cultured, not costume, and her hair was swept up, revealing the sharp line of her jaw and the deep scoop of the dress's back. She wore no coat, despite the chill. The velvet was heavy and warm, acting as armor. She was checking her makeup in the side mirror when the roar of an engine shattered the peace. A bright, obnoxious lime-green Lamborghini Urus tore up the driveway, gravel spraying violently as it screeched to a halt right in front of the stairs. The door opened, and Darian stepped out. He looked distinct. He was wearing a tuxedo, but the jacket was a shimmering metallic grey, and he had forgone a tie for an open collar, trying to look like a Hollywood mogul rather than the son of a logistics tycoon. Then the passenger door opened. Tiffany emerged. Sophia watched from the shadows of the oak trees. Tiffany was undeniably beautiful, in the way a billboard is beautiful. She was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with platinum blonde hair, extensions that cascaded down to her waist. But it was her dress that drew the eye. It was sheer, aggressively so. A sheer, crystal-encrusted mesh gown that left very little to the imagination, with strategically placed patches of fabric covering only the absolute essentials. It was a dress meant for a Las Vegas red carpet or an Instagram influencer's birthday party. It was loud, expensive, and screaming for attention. "Babe, watch the heels, it's gravel!" Tiffany shrieked, her voice cutting through the crisp air. She was wobbling on 6-inch platforms that looked more like architectural hazards than footwear. "I got you, Tiff," Darian said, puffing out his chest. He grabbed her hand, guiding her towards the stairs. Sophia waited a beat. She didn't want to walk in with them. She wanted them to settle, to take their space, before she made her entrance. She watched as the heavy oak doors opened, and the butler, Higgins, greeted them. She saw Higgins's professional mask slip for just a fraction of a second as he took in Tiffany's attire. Taking a deep breath, Sophia walked towards the light. Inside, the foyer was warm and smelled of beeswax and roasted lamb. The chatter drifted from the drawing room. Sophia handed her keys to Higgins. "Good evening, Mrs. Harrington," Higgins said, his voice warm. He emphasized the Mrs. "It is good to see you alone." "Thank you, Higgins. Is everyone in the drawing room?" "They are. Mr. Robert has been asking for you." Sophia nodded and walked towards the double doors. She paused at the threshold. She could hear Tiffany's voice, loud and brash. "So I told the waiter, 'Do you know who my boyfriend is?' And he literally panicked. It was hilarious." Sophia pushed the doors open. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. Robert Harrington was standing by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand. He was a man of 70, built like a retired boxer, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Eleanor sat on the velvet sofa, looking pained. Darian was pouring a drink at the bar, and Tiffany was posing near the grand piano, holding a flute of champagne as if she were filming a commercial. "Sophia!" Robert's voice boomed. He bypassed his son and walked straight to her. "You made it." "I wouldn't miss it, Robert," Sophia said, accepting his kiss on the cheek. Darian turned, glass in hand. He looked Sophia up and down. His eyes narrowed. He was looking for the flaw, the dowdiness he had predicted. But there was none. The dress fit her like a second skin. It was regal. It made her look like the lady of the manor, while Tiffany, in her flashing crystals, looked like hired entertainment. "Hi, Sophia," Darian said, his voice tight. "Glad you could make it." He gestured vaguely to the woman beside him. "You've met Tiffany, right?" They hadn't met. Not formally. Sophia had seen photos on Instagram. Darian was not discreet, but they had never stood face to face. Tiffany turned, flipping her hair. She scanned Sophia's outfit, her eyes lingering on the high neck of the velvet dress. A smirk curled on her lips. It was the smirk of someone who equates new with better. "Oh, hi," Tiffany said, not moving to shake hands. "Darian talks about you sometimes. You're the bookkeeper, right?" It was a calculated insult. Sophia was a CPA with a master's in finance who had managed the family's private holdings for a decade. Calling her a bookkeeper was like calling a surgeon a Band-Aid applicator. "I handle the family accounts, yes," Sophia said smoothly, her voice calm. "Hello, Tiffany. That's a very brave dress for a family dinner." Tiffany laughed, a high-pitched tinkling sound. "Brave? Honey, it's Versace. It's current season. Darian bought it for me last week in Milan. We just love travel." She looked Sophia up and down again dramatically. "I love your look too. Very vintage. Is that wool?" "Velvet," Sophia corrected. "Right, velvet." Tiffany wrinkled her nose. "It's very heavy looking. Doesn't it get hot? It looks like something my grandmother would have worn to church." Darian chuckled nervously. "Tiff has a really sharp eye for fashion, Sophia. She used to model." "Instagram modeling isn't runway, Darian," Robert grunted from the fireplace, taking a sip of his scotch. The tension in the room spiked. Eleanor cleared her throat loudly. "Dinner is ready to be served. Shall we move to the dining room?" "Let's," Darian said, guiding Tiffany by the small of her back. As they walked past Sophia, Tiffany leaned in, lowering her voice so only Sophia and Darian could hear. "Don't worry," Tiffany whispered, her breath smelling of strawberry vape and champagne. "I know it's hard seeing the upgrade, but try not to look so depressed. It ruins the vibe." Sophia didn't flinch. She didn't look at Tiffany. She looked at Darian. He avoided her gaze, focusing on the dining room doors. The upgrade, Sophia thought. She followed them into the dining room. The table was set for 5. The fine china, the heavy silver cutlery, the crystal goblets. It was a stage set for a disaster, and the curtain had just gone up. As they sat down, Sophia noticed Robert was watching her. He gave her a microscopic nod. It was a signal. "Hold your ground." She intended to. The dining room of the Harrington estate was designed to make people feel small. The ceiling was frescoed, the walls panelled in dark mahogany, and the chandelier was a cascading waterfall of crystal that had hung there since the 1920s. They took their seats. Robert sat at the head of the table, a king on his throne. Eleanor sat at the opposite end. Darian and Tiffany sat on one side, while Sophia sat alone on the other, facing them. The visual imbalance was striking. Sophia looked like a defendant facing a tribunal, yet she sat with a posture that suggested she was the judge. Higgins and the serving staff moved silently, pouring the wine. A 2012 Chateau Margaux. "Oh, fancy," Tiffany chirped, picking up her glass before a toast had been proposed. She took a large gulp. A little dry for me. Darian, can we get some Sprite to mix in this? Make a spritzer?" Higgins froze mid-pour at the next glass. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for strength. "It's a $300 bottle, Tiffany," Darian muttered, his face flushing pink. "Just drink it." "She can have whatever she likes, Darian," Sophia said from across the table. Her voice was cool, devoid of malice, which made it all the more unnerving. If she prefers Sprite, let her have Sprite. Palates are acquired. Tiffany narrowed her eyes at Sophia. She sensed the insult but couldn't quite grab onto it. "I just like sweet things," she said defensively. "I'm not into all this bitter old stuff." "Clearly," Robert rumbled. He raised his glass. "To family. And to clarity." "To family," Sophia echoed, meeting Robert's eyes. Darian drank quickly. He was nervous. He kept checking his watch, then his phone, which sat on the table next to his fork, a breach of Harrington table etiquette that would have gotten him sent to his room 20 years ago. The first course was a lobster bisque, rich and creamy. The only sound for a few minutes was the clinking of silver spoons against fine china. "So," Tiffany started, unable to handle the silence. "This place is huge. Darian says it's worth like 20 million. Is that true?" Robert didn't look up from his soup. "The value of this house, young lady, is that 5 generations of Harringtons have lived and died here. It is not an asset to be liquidated on Zillow." Tiffany giggled, seemingly immune to gravitas. "Right. Sentimental value. I get it. My parents have this timeshare in Florida that they love." "Same thing." She turned to Sophia, a wicked glint in her eye. She was bored with the old people. She wanted to poke the ex. Or the current wife, technically. "So, Sophia," Tiffany said, leaning forward, her chest pressing against the table edge. "Darian tells me you guys didn't travel much. That must have been so boring for him. We've been to Tulum, Paris, and Milan just in the last 3 months." Sophia wiped the corner of her mouth with her linen napkin. "Darian always suffered from motion sickness," she said calmly. "I see he's overcome it." "He just needed the right motivation," Tiffany smirked, reaching over to squeeze Darian's bicep. "We have so much fun. We're actually looking at buying a place in Saint-Tropez, a summer house." Sophia's eyes flickered to Darian. Darian suddenly found his lobster bisque fascinating. "Saint-Tropez?" Sophia asked. "The real estate market there is quite aggressive right now." "Oh, money isn't an issue," Tiffany waved her hand, her diamond bracelet clattering. "Darian's business is booming. He says he's about to close a deal that will triple his net worth." Sophia paused. She knew Darian's business inside and out. She knew he was currently leveraged to the hilt. The consulting firm was bleeding cash, and he had taken a loan against his future inheritance, a loan Robert didn't know about yet. "Is that so?" Sophia asked, her voice dropping an octave. "Triple his net worth? That is impressive, Darian. Which client is this?" Darian choked on his wine. It's in the works, Sophia. Non-disclosure agreements. You wouldn't understand the tech sector." "I understand numbers, Darian," Sophia said softly. "And I understand debt." "What's that supposed to mean?" Tiffany snapped, sensing the shift in power. "It means," Robert interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension like a cleaver, "that we do not discuss business at the dinner table. Eleanor, the soup is excellent." "Thank you, Robert," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a new recipe," Tiffany huffed, annoyed that her bragging had been cut short. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling, the blue light illuminating her face in the dim, candle-lit room. She held the phone up, angling it for a selfie with the chandelier in the background. Click, the flash went off, blinding everyone for a second. "Tiffany," Darian hissed, "put the phone away. I'm just documenting the night, babe. My followers love this old money aesthetic. It's trending right now. #old money, #luxury. She looked at Sophia. "You wouldn't get it. You don't even have an Instagram, do you?" "I prefer to live my life, not broadcast it," Sophia replied. "That's what people say when they have nothing to show off," Tiffany shot back. The table went silent again. The air was getting thinner, sharper. Higgins arrived to clear the bowls. He moved with practiced invisibility. But when he reached for Tiffany's bowl, she wasn't done. She was busy typing a caption. I'm not done yet, she snapped at the butler without looking up. Apologies, madam, Higgins said stiffly. It's Miss, she corrected. Soon to be Mrs., if Darian plays his cards right. She winked at Darian. Darian looked like he wanted to slide under the table. He was sweating now. He knew his father. He knew the volcano was dormant, not extinct, and Tiffany was dancing on the crater. Actually, Tiffany said, putting her phone down and turning her full attention to Sophia. Speaking of Mrs., when are you going to sign the papers, Sophia? I mean, holding on is just sad. Darian clearly has moved on. We're happy. Why delay the inevitable? Eleanor gasped. Young lady, this is hardly the time. No, Eleanor, Sophia said, raising a hand. It's a fair question. Sophia looked across the table at the young woman. Tiffany was pretty, yes, but she was hollow. She was a vessel for Darian's midlife crisis, a mirror reflecting his vanity. I haven't signed the papers, Tiffany, Sophia said, enunciating every word, because Darian hasn't presented a settlement that doesn't involve me assuming half of his gambling debts. The silence that followed was absolute. Darian dropped his spoon. It clattered loudly against the china. Gambling debts? Tiffany frowned, looking at Darian. You said those were business losses. They were. High-risk investments, Darian stammered. Crypto. It's complicated. It was poker, Darian, Sophia said comfortably. And sports betting. The house in the Caymans? Gone. The vintage Porsche collection? Liquidated last month to pay a bookie in Vegas. I saw the bank transfers. Tiffany stared at Darian, her mouth slightly open. The illusion of the bottomless wallet was cracking. You sold the Porsches? Tiffany whispered. You said they were in storage. Enough. Darian slammed his hand on the table. Sophia, stop trying to sabotage my relationship with your lies. They aren't lies if I have the bank statements, Darian, Sophia said, taking a sip of wine. But please, let's not ruin Eleanor's dinner. We were talking about fashion, weren't we? The main course was served, rack of lamb with a herb crust. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the room, but no one had an appetite. Tiffany was seething. The revelation about the money had shaken her, but her defense mechanism was attack. She couldn't attack Sophia on money anymore. Sophia clearly held the ledger. So she went for the appearance. She went for the one thing she felt she dominated, beauty and style. She picked at her lamb, then looked up, her eyes locking onto Sophia's velvet dress. You know, Tiffany began, her voice dripping with faux concern. I was trying to be nice earlier, but I really have to say it. That dress is a disaster. Ton. Darian looked at Tiffany, pleading with his eyes for her to stop, but he was too weak to stop her. He was terrified of her temper, terrified of losing the youth she provided him. It's just so heavy, Tiffany continued, gesturing with her fork. It swallows you up. And the fabric? It looks dusty, like it's been sitting in an attic for 50 years. It has, Sophia said, give or take. Exactly, Tiffany laughed, looking around the table for validation. It's totally out of style. High necks, long sleeves. It's giving spinster librarian. No offense. None taken, Sophia said. I mean, look at me, Tiffany said, sitting up straighter to emphasize the sheerness of her crystal mesh. This is what men want. They want to see what they're getting. They want fresh. They want new. That thing you're wearing. It screams, I've given up. She turned to Darian. Babe, tell her. You told me in the car she looked like a gloomy curtain. Darian froze. He had said that. He hadn't expected to be quoted. Well, it is a bit dark, Sophia, Darian mumbled, staring at his plate. Tiffany is very up on the trends. She knows what's in style. Style? Sophia said thoughtfully. She set her knife and fork down. She looked at the midnight blue velvet on her arm. She stroked the fabric gently. You think this is just a dress, Tiffany? Sophia asked quietly. It's a piece of cloth, Tiffany shrugged, and an ugly one. This dress, Sophia said, her voice gaining a steely resonance, was custom-made in Paris in 1962 by Hubert de Givenchy, not off the rack, not a season. It was made specifically for Genevieve Harrington. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Who cares? It's old. Genevieve Harrington, Sophia continued, ignoring the interruption, was Robert's sister. In 1968, she wore this dress to a gala in Vienna, where she negotiated the release of 3 hostages held by a separatist group, simply by charming the lead negotiator and refusing to leave the room until they were safe. She was 26 years old. Sophia looked at Robert. The old man was staring at her, his eyes misty. She wore this dress, Sophia went on, when she accepted her Legion of Honor. This fabric has been in rooms where maps were redrawn. It has history. It has dignity. Sophia turned her gaze back to Tiffany. You are wearing a dress that was mass-produced in a factory, designed to last for 1 season before the crystals fall off, purchased with money that doesn't exist, to impress people on the internet who don't know you. Sophia leaned forward. This dress doesn't scream, I've given up, Tiffany. It screams that I don't need to show my skin to prove my worth. I wear my history. You wear a price tag. There is a difference. The room was deathly silent. Tiffany's face turned a violent shade of red. She wasn't used to being outsmarted. She was used to being the hottest girl in the room. Whatever, Tiffany spat. It's still ugly, and you're just jealous because you're old and Darian doesn't want you anymore. He wants me. He wants this. She gestured to her body. He doesn't want some history lesson wrapped in a rug. She looked at Darian. Tell her, Darian. Tell her she looks like a frump. Tell her this dinner is a joke. Darian looked at Sophia. He looked at the dress. He remembered his Aunt Genevieve vaguely. A terrifying, wonderful woman. He looked at Tiffany, whose face was twisted in a sneer. Tiffany, maybe we should... Darian started. No, Tiffany slammed her hand on the table again. I'm sick of her acting superior. She's a nobody. She's just the help you married, and that dress is trash. It looks like something you'd find in a donation bin. She picked up her wine glass, her hand shaking with rage. Honestly, it would look better with a stain on it. At least then it would have some color. She made a motion, a feint, as if she were going to toss the wine toward Sophia. It was a threat, a bratty gesture of dominance. That was the moment the atmosphere broke. Clang! It was a sharp, violent sound. Robert Harrington had dropped his heavy silver fork onto his plate. It wasn't a mistake. It was a gavel strike. He slowly pushed his chair back. The legs of the heavy oak chair scraped against the parquet floor, a sound like a growl. Robert stood up. He was 6'2", and despite his age, he was broad-shouldered and imposing. His face, usually flushed with good humor or red with scotch, was now pale, cold stone. His eyes were fixed on his son. Silence, Robert said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command spoken with the absolute authority of a man who had built an empire. Tiffany froze, her wine glass half raised. She looked at Robert, expecting to see an annoyed old man. Instead, she saw a titan. Darian, Robert said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You have brought a guest into my home. Dad, she's just upset, Darian began, rising halfway out of his chair. Sit down, Robert barked. Darian sat. Robert turned his gaze to Tiffany. He didn't look at her body. He didn't look at the crystals. He looked right into her eyes, and she shrank back. You have insulted my wife's hospitality, Robert said, ticking the points off on his fingers. You have insulted my family's history. You have insulted a woman who has done more for this family in 10 years than my own son has done in 40. He pointed a shaking finger at the velvet dress Sophia wore. And you dared, Robert's voice rose, vibrating through the crystal chandelier, to mock the memory of my sister Genevieve, a woman whose shadow you are not fit to stand in. I didn't know, Tiffany stammered, her bravado evaporating instantly. I was just making a joke. A joke, Robert repeated. You think this family is a joke? You think this dinner is content for your followers? Robert turned to his son. "Darian, get her out." "Dad, come on," Darian pleaded. "We haven't even had dessert. She's sorry. Right, Tiff?" "I said," Robert roared, his fist slamming onto the table, causing the wine glasses to jump. "Get her out, now!" "And Darian," Robert added, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "don't come back until you remember who you are, because the man sitting there, I don't recognize him." Darian turned pale. He looked at Tiffany, who was now trembling, tears welling up in her eyes, not of remorse, but of embarrassment. "Let's go," Darian whispered to her. "But my bag—" Tiffany reached for her clutch. "Leave it!" Darian snapped. He grabbed her arm, roughly this time. They scrambled away from the table. The clicking of Tiffany's heels was frantic, uneven, a chaotic staccato retreating down the hallway. The front door opened and slammed shut. The engine of the Lamborghini roared outside, then faded into the distance. Silence fell over the dining room. Eleanor was holding a napkin to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sophia sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, the velvet of her dress catching the candlelight. Robert stood at the head of the table, breathing heavily. He looked at Sophia. The anger in his eyes faded, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. "I apologize, Sophia," Robert said, his voice breaking. "I apologize that you had to endure that under my roof." Sophia stood up slowly. She walked to the head of the table. She reached out and took Robert's hand, squeezing it firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for, Robert," she said gently. "Genevieve would have loved the show. She always did enjoy a good fight." Robert let out a short, dry chuckle that turned into a sigh. He squeezed her hand back. "The dinner is ruined," Eleanor whispered. "No," Sophia said, turning to the butler who was standing in the shadows, looking shell-shocked. "Higgins?" "Yes, madam?" "Bring the dessert. And perhaps," she looked at the empty bottle of wine, "something stronger for Robert." "Right away, madam." Sophia sat back down. The chair opposite her was empty. The air was clear, but she knew this wasn't the end. Darian had been humiliated. Tiffany had been scorned, and the secrets about the money were now out in the open. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. The drive back to the city was a masterclass in toxicity. The lime-green Lamborghini, usually a vessel of arrogance, felt claustrophobic. Darian gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, while Tiffany sat in the passenger seat, furiously typing on her phone. She wasn't posting to Instagram this time. She was Googling. "Is it true?" Tiffany asked, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. She didn't look at him. "Is what true?" Darian snapped, swerving slightly as he changed lanes aggressively. "The money, the Porsches, the gambling." She turned to him, her eyes wide with a mix of panic and accusation. "Darian, you told me you sold the cars because they were bad for the environment. You told me we were liquidating assets to buy the villa in Saint-Tropez." "It's complicated, Tiff," Darian groaned. "My dad is he's controlling. He tries to squeeze me financially to make me obey him. It's a power play. Once the big deal closes next week, none of this matters." "What deal, Darian?" Tiffany screamed. "The tech deal? Because I just searched your name and lawsuit, and guess what came up? A foreclosure notice on the downtown penthouse." Darian slammed on the brakes as they hit a red light. "That is a clerical error. My lawyers are handling it." "You said you owned the penthouse," Tiffany hissed. "You said you bought it with your crypto gains." "I do. I mean, I will. Look, just shut up for a second, okay? I need to think." They drove the rest of the way in silence. When they pulled up to the sleek, high-rise building, the valet didn't rush to open the door. In fact, the valet looked uncomfortable. Darian tossed the keys to him. "Keep it close. We're going out again later." The valet caught the keys but didn't move. "Mr. Harrington, I'm sorry, but management left a note. You can't park here anymore." Darian froze. "Excuse me?" "The monthly spot fees," the valet said, lowering his voice. "They're 3 months overdue. And the leasing office said your fob has been deactivated until the balance is cleared." Tiffany let out a gasp that was pure horror. She looked at the valet, then at Darian, then at the bright green car that suddenly looked less like a chariot and more like a liability. "Fix this, Darian," she warned, stepping out of the car and marching towards the lobby. Darian scrambled after her. "It's a mistake. I'll write them a check right now." But when they got to the elevators, Tiffany swiped her keycard. Nothing happened. A small red light blinked. Access denied. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered. "We're locked out." "It's Sophia," Darian muttered, his face twisting into a mask of hate. "She's doing this. She handles the accounts. She cut the payments to embarrass me." He pulled out his phone and dialed Sophia. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed his father. Voicemail. He dialed his assistant at the firm. "Mr. Harrington?" The assistant's voice was shaky. "Jessica, why is my building pass not working? And why is the valet hassling me? Transfer the funds from the operating account immediately." I can't, sir." "What do you mean you can't?" "Security is here, sir," Jessica whispered. "They're escorting me out. Mr. Robert Harrington is here. He's firing everyone in your division. He's shutting down the consulting arm. Darian, they're auditing the company credit cards." Darian dropped the phone. It hit the marble floor of the lobby with a crack. Tiffany looked at him. She looked at the cracked phone. She looked at his terrified face. The math was simple. No penthouse, no money, no influence. "You're broke," she stated flatly. "No, Tiff, listen. You're actually broke." She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "And you made me humiliate myself in front of your family. You made me wear this dress, this cheap dress, for a man who can't even pay for parking. Tiff, baby, we can go to a hotel. I have the Amex Black card." "The one linked to the company account?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "The company that just fired you?" Darian reached into his wallet and pulled out the heavy titanium card. He ran to the front desk of the building concierge. "Run it. Book me the guest suite for a week. Now." The concierge, a young man who had tolerated Darian's rudeness for months, took the card with a tight smile. He swiped it. "Declined, sir." Darian stared at the terminal. Tiffany didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply opened her clutch, took out her phone, and typed a text. A moment later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside. An Uber. "Where are you going?" Darian asked, grabbing her arm. She shook him off. "I'm going to stay with my friends, the ones you said were too poor for us to hang out with. Tiffany, don't do this. I love you." She looked at him with absolute pity. "Darian, you don't love me. You loved that I looked good on your arm, and I loved that you bought me things. The transaction is over." She walked out the spinning doors. Darian watched her get into the Uber. She didn't look back. He stood alone in the lobby of the building he pretended to own, wearing a metallic tuxedo jacket with a dead phone and a declined credit card. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The Harrington Logistics headquarters was a glass monolith in the financial district. Usually Darian Harrington strolled in at 11 a.m., hungover and smelling of expensive cologne, to sign a few papers he didn't read. Today, however, the atmosphere on the 40th floor was different. Sophia was there at 7 a.m. She wasn't wearing the velvet dress. She was wearing a charcoal grey power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She sat at the head of the conference table in the executive boardroom. To her right sat Robert Harrington. To her left sat George Banks, the company's chief legal counsel, and a team of forensic accountants. The table was covered in stacks of paper, red ink, bank transfers, casino markers. "It's worse than we thought, Robert," Sophia said, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. Robert looked older today. The fire from the dinner had burned out, leaving only ash. He put on his reading glasses and looked at the numbers. "He siphoned from the pension fund?" Robert asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Technically he borrowed against future dividends," Sophia corrected, her voice professional but sympathetic. "But he forged your signature on the authorization, Robert. That makes it embezzlement." and fraud. Robert closed his eyes. My son is a thief. He's an addict, Sophia said gently. The gambling, the lifestyle. It's a sickness. But the damage to the company is real. If the shareholders find out he raided the pension fund, the stock will tank. We're talking about a hostile takeover vulnerability. How much, Noche? Robert asked. 4 million from the pension, 3 million in unauthorized loans, and the personal debts. The bookies. Sophia sighed. He owes dangerous people about $2 million. George Banks cleared his throat. Robert, we have to go to the police. The pension fraud is a federal crime. If we cover it up and the SEC finds out, we all go to jail. Robert stared out the window at the city skyline he had helped build. I cannot send my son to prison, George. He is a fool. But he is my blood. Then you have to cut him off, Sophia said firmly. Completely. And we need to replace the money immediately. I don't have $7 million in liquid cash sitting around, Sophia, Robert snapped. Most of my wealth is tied up in the stock. If I sell a block that size now, it signals panic. I know, Sophia said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single, thin blue folder. She placed it in front of Robert. What is this? This, Sophia said, is my personal portfolio, my inheritance from my grandfather, plus the investments I've made over the last 10 years. I shorted the tech stocks Darian was obsessed with. I invested in logistics competitors and then sold when they peaked. She opened the folder. A bank statement sat on top. The balance was staggering. $8 million, Robert read. He looked up at Sophia, shocked. You have $8 million. I'm a very good accountant, Robert, she said with a small, sad smile. I'm willing to loan this to the company. Interest-free. To plug the hole in the pension fund and buy out Darian's debt. The room was silent. George Banks looked at Sophia with newfound respect. Robert looked at her with tears in his eyes. Why? Robert asked. After what he did to you? After the mistress? The humiliation? Because this isn't for Darian, Sophia said, her voice hard as steel. This is for the company. This is for Eleanor. And this is for the name. I'm a Harrington, Robert. I won't let the name be dragged through the mud because your son never grew up. But there is a condition, Sophia added. Name it, Robert said. Darian is out. Permanently. He signs over his voting shares to me. He steps down from the board. He receives a monthly stipend. Small, enough for rent and groceries, supervised by a trustee. But he never touches company operations again. And I want the divorce finalized today, on my terms. Robert didn't hesitate. He picked up his pen. George, draw it up. Just then, the double doors of the boardroom banged open. Darian burst in. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes as the night before, rumpled and stained. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were wild. You can't do this, Darian shouted, storming towards the table. Security tried to stop me. This is my company, my birthright. Sit down, Darian, George Banks said calmly. I won't sit down. I'm the heir. You can't fire me. He pointed a shaking finger at Sophia. And you orchestrated this. You poisoned him against me. Darian, Robert said, not even looking at him. Read the room. I want my trust fund, Darian screamed. I need cash, now. They're going to break my legs, Dad. The guys in Vegas, they don't joke around. We know, Sophia said. She stood up. Which is why we're paying them off. Today. Darian stopped. He blinked, confusion washing over his panic. You are? You're paying the debt? I am paying the debt, Sophia said. Me. Personally. Darian let out a breath of relief, a pathetic, weeping laugh. Oh, thank God. Sophia, I knew you still loved me. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Look, I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll dump Tiffany. She's already gone, anyway. And we can go back to how it was. He took a step toward her, arms open. Sophia didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him with the same cold detachment one might view a dead insect. You misunderstand, Darian, she said. I'm not paying your debt because I love you. I'm buying your debt." "What?" "I'm buying the note," Sophia explained, as if speaking to a slow child. "I am paying off the bookies, and now you owe me. But unlike the bookies, I don't want your money. I want your shares." She slid the document George had just printed across the table. "Sign this. It transfers all your stock in Harrington Logistics to me. In exchange, the debt is forgiven, the pension fraud is buried, and you get a monthly allowance of $5,000. If you don't sign, I call the SEC, I call the police, and I let the Vegas bookies do whatever they want with you." Darian looked at the paper. He looked at his father. "Dad," he pleaded, "you can't let her take my company." Robert Harrington stood up. He walked over to Sophia and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your company, son," Robert said softly. "It never was. You were just holding it. And you dropped it." He looked at Sophia. "It belongs to the person who knows how to carry the weight." Darian looked at the pen. He looked at the window. He looked at Sophia, the woman he had called dowdy, the woman he had cheated on, the woman he had underestimated every single day of their marriage. He realized then, for the first time, that she had always been the strongest person in the room. He had just been too blinded by glitter to see the gold. With a trembling hand, Darian picked up the pen. He signed the paper. He signed away his legacy. "Good," Sophia said, pulling the paper away before the ink was even dry. "Now get out of my boardroom." 6 months is an eternity in the world of high finance. Winter had stripped the Harrington estate bare, but now spring was pushing through the frost. For Sophia, the last half-year had been a blur of board meetings and legal briefings. She had stepped into the role of acting CEO, not with a shout, but with a terrifying, quiet efficiency. She cut the dead weight, restored the pension fund with her own capital, and watched the stock price soar. Tonight was the Harrington Spring Charity Gala. Unlike the disastrous autumn dinner, the atmosphere was electric with respect, not tension. Sophia stood at the top of the grand staircase. She wasn't wearing the vintage velvet dress tonight. That belonged to the past. She wore a structure of white silk, a suit tailored so perfectly it looked like modern armor. Robert Harrington waited at the bottom. He looked 10 years younger, the stress of covering for his son finally lifted. "The board is terrified of you, Sophia," he chuckled as she took his arm. "George Banks says you negotiate like a shark." "I just read the fine print, Robert," she smiled. They entered the ballroom, and the room turned. This wasn't the polite indifference she used to receive as Darian's wife. This was the deference paid to power. Around 9 p.m., Sophia stepped onto the terrace for air. The scent of jasmine was thick in the night breeze. She looked over the stone balustrade toward the service entrance. There, leaning against a dented grey sedan, smoking a cigarette, was a man. Sophia didn't retreat. She waited. Darian Harrington climbed the stone steps slowly. He looked diminished. The metallic tuxedo was gone, replaced by a cheap blazer that fit poorly. His face was gaunt, his swagger replaced by a nervous shuffle. "Hi, Sophia," he rasped, crushing his cigarette under a scuffed shoe. "Security barely let me in. Dad really locked the place down." "You're on the guest list, Darian," Sophia said, her voice neutral. "You're still his son, but not his heir." Darian looked at her, taking in the pearls, the silk, the radiating confidence. "You look different. I'm exactly the person I always was, Darian. You just never bothered to look." Darian winced. "I know. I'm working at a logistics firm in Jersey now. Dispatch manager. It's hard work. My apartment radiator clanks." He paused, waiting for her to offer a check or sympathy. When she remained silent, he stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I made a mistake, Sophia." "Tiffany." She left the second the credit cards were cut. "I was having a crisis. But I've changed. I miss us. I miss this house." He reached out a hand. Can't we try again? I could be your husband. We could be a power couple. Sophia looked at his hand. She felt a phantom ache, the memory of love, but it was just an echo in an empty room. She saw him clearly now, a weak man looking for a new prop to hold him up. Darian, she said gently, do you remember the dinner? The velvet dress? You were ashamed of me because you thought I made you look small. Now you want to stand next to me because you think I make you look big. Sophia, please. I am not a jacket you put on when it's cold, Darian. And I am not a trophy you hold to prove you've won. She stepped back toward the golden light of the ballroom. I am the prize you lost. Is there no chance? He called out. Sophia stopped at the glass doors. No, the books are closed. She stepped inside. Robert raised his glass in a silent toast. Sophia took a sip of champagne, crisp, cold, and perfect. She wasn't lonely. She was whole. Outside, Darian watched her become the queen of his lost castle. He stood in the cold for a long time before turning away, driving his dented car into the dark, leaving the legacy behind him forever. So what happened to the players in this tragedy? Darian learned that inheritance is a privilege, not a right, and that stripped of his name, he was a man who had to start from zero at 40 years old. Tiffany learned that beauty without substance is a depreciating asset, and that some doors, once closed, never open again. But Sophia learned the most important lesson of all. She learned that dignity is not about being loud. It's not about the newest dress, the youngest partner, or the flashiest car. Dignity is a spine of steel wrapped in velvet. It is the ability to sit in a room while people mock you, knowing that you hold the keys to the kingdom in your pocket. She didn't just survive the humiliation, she monetized it. She took the stones they threw at her and built a fortress. In the end, the dowdy wife didn't just get the last word. She got the last laugh, the company, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing exactly what you are worth. Wow, that was a roller coaster, wasn't it? I want to know what you would have done. If you were Sophia, would you have paid off Darian's gambling debts just to get the company? Or would you have let him rot in jail? And honestly, did Robert let Darian off too easy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, justice, and high-stakes drama, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. We have a crazy one coming up next week about a cheating husband who forgot his wife was his divorce lawyer. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, class is permanent. 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 Class is permanent.